Hello, you're listening to The Way the World is Going Now, a Liffey Sound FM series funded by Commission Naman with the television licence fee. A lot has happened, a lot has changed. The world is a completely different place than it was, say, 100 years ago. So, what's different now? And what direction might we be headed in? My name is Neil Elworthy, and together with my guests, we'll be looking at some of these questions over the forthcoming episodes. So sit back, grab a coffee, strap yourself in, and let's start. Today we're going to start off with education. My special guests today are Bernadette Obinski-Burke, who is the Chief Executive of Childminding Ireland, and we're going to hear from Sylvia Abramova, who is a childminder with her own childminding setting, who is at the coalface of childcare provision. Bernadette, first of all, welcome to the programme on the way the world is today. We're looking at education and looking at early years and childcare. What, just for the viewers who are listening out there, what is a childminder as opposed to a nanny or an au pair or a childcare provider? What is a childminder?
Thanks very much for having me, first of all, Neil, and for asking me that question, because it does become quite confused for people. But a childminder is minding children in the childminder's home, and they're self-employed and they work alone, whereas a nanny typically is living in the parent's home and minding the children in the children's home. So they will be employed by the parents, so it's a very different model. And au pairs tend to be fairly short-term people who come over, sometimes language students coming over to get experience of working in another country. They tend, as I say, to be fairly short-term, so they wouldn't be with the children over extended periods. But primary difference really is the fact that the childminder is self-employed, working alone in the childminder's home.
So really, it's the setting is a home-from-home setting for the child.
Absolutely. I mean, you would get the home-from-home, obviously, with the nanny, because they're working in the children's home. But very much the childminding, the whole ethos of childminding is a home-from-home environment. And we know from long experience working with childminders that they often become like extended family of the family that the children they're minding. And we have wonderful stories of childminders going to weddings and christenings and then sometimes minding the children of the children that they minded. So it really is a fantastic relationship-based form of childcare. So,
to not put too blunt a point on it then, there's a huge difference between centre-based childcare provision and a childminder. So is there like one set of rules for, a giraffes or a lynx and another set of rules for a childminder?
Yep. I have to say, we just think that childminding is wonderful, so I know that I'm biased, but you'll have to forgive me that. But childminding really is that sort of possibility of children being individuals within the home. They can have their own interests, they can have their own need to rest or not rest, or their own love of the outside or the inside. They don't have to conform with what's planned for the day. The day can be planned around the children. It can be spontaneous. Often what you also get as well is a mixed group of children, so you'll get some children of different ages. And we know that's an incredible benefit for children because, this desire to always do what the older children are doing, it sort of pulls them along in terms of their development and their courage and confidence. And the group of children become a little family of their own as well, because they're together every day, and so there is a huge difference in the way that the two sectors work. Really, centre-based has to be more structured because they have larger numbers and children of the same age are together in the same rooms. We know that unfortunately there does tend to be in some centre bases at the moment. We know there's a very large difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff. So unfortunately you wouldn't necessarily have the same person minding the same children on an ongoing basis. Whereas the childminder typically would mind a child from babyhood right through national school into secondary school would be very common. So you get that continuity of care, which is really important for a child. There are different setups. Just in the last month or so, new regulations have come in for childminders. Childminders are going to be regulated for the first time, really. There has been a small number of childminders who were registered with TUSLA, but there was only really about less than 70 in the whole country, so it was a very, very small number. But the government have brought in new childcare regulations for all childminders. There's a 3-year transition period, and at the end of the 3-year period, which I think is 2028, September time, it will be mandatory for all childminders, even if you're minding just one child, to be registered with TUSLA.
Just on the idea of numbers, in a centre-based environment, they could have like 20, 30 children, because I presume there's a children to minder or children to ratio.
Yeah.
What's the ratio for childminders?
Well, currently it's if you're minding preschool children on your 4th preschool child that you're minding, you have to register with TUSLA. But if you're minding under 4 preschoolers or under 7 children of any age, you don't have to register with TUSLA. And with the new regulations, as I say, there's this 3-year window, so childminders don't yet have to adopt the new regulations, but it'll be 6 children. There'll be a ratio of 6 children to 1 childminder, and within that then there are other ratios like 2 children under 15 months and so on. It gets a bit technical, but that's essentially it. Yeah. Okay,
right. And when we look at the centre-based facilities that are out there, obviously, like a lot of these are either purpose-built or they're in an industrial unit, and the interior is designed, to be fit for purposes. Yeah. I suppose. If I'm a childminder working from my home,
yeah,
my home's going to vary, isn't it? Like between, let's say, a standard 3-bedroom semi to a flat or an apartment to a farm or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do you square that circle? How is that brought into under the regulation of the government?
Well, it's a very good question. I think it also points to one of the strengths of childminding, that each childminder is as unique as the person running the childminding service. And that means that families can find the childminder that suits them and suits their child. So yes, there's huge variety, as you've listed out, the very different types of homes out there, and childminders can be in rental properties as well, and minding children, so there shouldn't be any barrier to anybody who is interested in pursuing it as a career. So you were asking me there that given the various different types of homes, how do you
regulate for that?
Yes, how do you regulate for that? I think it's really because you're looking at principles rather than specifics. So you're looking at, a safe environment, a clean environment, access to outdoor space. So that you might be lucky enough to be able to open a back door and have a garden, or you may be living in an apartment, as you say, where that's not feasible. But as long as you can access a park, a local park, or some green space, or some other alternative, so that there is access to the outside, then you would be appropriate to childmind.
Um, One thing I always have had an issue with, particularly in my own business, is that we'll talk about regulation, and I feel that with the democratization of the airwaves, certainly regulation can hinder individuality and individual voices. Of course, we all have to adhere to laws of libel and what you can and cannot say, and fake news and all of that. On my end of it. Do you think that regulation for childminders, sometimes it can be overbearing for a childminder because it's just one person in that their setting, and they have to do absolutely everything, and then just when they feel that they've got it right, the regulations are adapted or changed, every couple of years?
Well, I suppose, in all honesty, we're in an experimental phase at the moment. I think it's fair to say that those childminders who were registered with TUSLA prior to the new regulations were working with a set of regulations that were really designed for centre-based. And I think that explains why so few childminders took that up. As I said, probably less than 70 in the entire country. And I think, they were obviously very capable and did very well with them, but they were, I think, widely accepted not to be suitable for childminders, as you say, working single-handedly in the home. So we now have the new regulations, and it's going to be, as well as the 3-year period for childminders to adapt and decide if they wish to continue and wish to register under the new regulations. There's also going to be a period of exploring those new regulations, and Childminding Ireland has called for a review at the 18-month period, so that there's still an 18-month period left so that we can make any changes necessary before they become mandatory. And we want that review to obviously include stakeholders, not just childminders, although primarily childminders, but also parents and other stakeholders, to see, are the new regulations achieving their ambitions, and if there are any obstacles or any difficulties that are emerging, can they be modified? Or, we would always say there's always a way, if you try hard enough, how are they going to be modified so that they encourage childminders into the system and retain those childminders working within it.
Which brings me along actually to my next question, and it's about sustainability. Given the fact that it's an uphill battle for childminders, because, as you said, all the rules and regulations are for at the moment anyway are for centre based. Do you find that there's a shortfall in the amount of childminders that are there long term, or that you feel that some of the childminders are going, I've had enough of this, I've just it's not for me anymore?
Yeah, I take your point. We have obviously got a lot of very experienced childminders, and we noticed that very much at the beginning of this process, where the draft childminding regulations were brought out, and the department had a 12-week public consultation on the initially suggested regulations, and there was, a huge pushback. Childminders could not identify with those regulations and felt they were completely over the top for them and wouldn't work within their practice and so on. So there was, as I say, a consultation process, and the government then used an independent body to review the feedback, and essentially it was overwhelmingly negative, I think it's fair to say. So the department, in fairness to them, set about working with Childminding Ireland and working to see how the originally suggested regulations could be modified to be more appropriate for the childminding setting. And we organised for the lead civil servant and the lead person from TUSLA to visit a couple of childminding settings so they could see the environment and how would it work in this setting? So it was a really visual, really real life, real world experience. And then we had a focus group online with some very experienced childminders talking directly to these two lead people. And in fairness to the Minister and the department, they made large changes to the original suggested regulations. And we welcomed them. We're not saying they're perfect, but we're saying they are very doable. And given we have this, hopefully this review at 18 months with the prospect of further change if needed, the fact that the department did make changes and the Minister did make changes, I think that's really improved the confidence of childminders, that they feel they were listened to, and I think they can see their voices in the new regulations now, both in the language and in the level of regulation. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. I'm going to talk a four-letter word, a nasty four-letter word, cost. Because there's two costs. There's two costs. There's the cost that we all hear about to parents of childcare. Always a hot potato when it comes around to election time as well. But there's also the cost of actually running the business as well. Let's just talk about that for a start. First of all, let's look at the cost of the parent that we always hear about. Yep. That sometimes, they're only earning enough money to put their kid through childcare. And that isn't always the case. I mean, there are things that they can avail of as well. There are funding that's available from the government to help alleviate childcare. Is that also available through childminders?
Only through registered childminders. So if you are a registered childminder, you can offer the National Childcare Scheme to parents or families using your service, but you have to be registered with TUSLA.
But you're saying now that all childminders, even with one child, will have to be registered with TUSLA anyway?
Yes. But it will then be their choice whether or not they register and apply to offer the NCS. It's not automatic.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to have to look at the NCS and how does it need to be modified to make it workable for childminders, or is there a different financial model that would work better? And it's our understanding that 2025 is the next phase of the National Action Plan for Childminding, and finance for childminding is going to be a primary focus of that period. So we'll see.
And the cost of, again, to parents, the cost to parents usually revolves around, or at least from what I hear, because I remember when our son was going through childcare, it usually revolved around the knock-on costs of the childcare provision. So it must be hugely expensive for a childminder to set up a business, to run books, to kit out the house, to have the house structurally sound for purpose. Whether that's fire alarms or safety blankets or toys and facilities that are in good keeping and that are maintained. So just run through some of the heavy costs that a childminder may incur.
Well, all of the above, really, that you mentioned, and certainly the age-appropriate toys, depending on the children that you're minding, and your garden facilities. If you have a garden, you may wish to have a swing in it or a playhouse or whatever. So, but I mean, I think you're right. I think there's the wear and tear on the fabric of the house. I think there's the, if you are providing meals, there's the additional shopping, and as you say, you need somebody to look at your books once a year if you're not capable of doing it yourself or have the training to do it yourself. So there are costs, and I think what we do run a really popular course on tax, showing people how to record all their costs, because a lot of childminders, because it's a family-based form of childcare, sometimes childminders don't see the costs that they're incurring for their childminding business. You know, it's all sort of putting extra food in the trolley rather than actually seeing that this is part of my business costs and this is part of my domestic costs.
And
So,
being able to keep receipts and offset
absolutely.
that against your taxes
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
Yeah. And also, you know, the wear and tear. I mean, you know, if you've got a very loved chair or a very loved sofa or something like that, you know, it may be that you need to replace that or to replace the coverings or whatever. So I think it, you know, if any childminders are out there, you don't have to be a member of Childminding Ireland to come to the training course, and it's reasonably inexpensive. I think it would save you a lot of money because it really does identify a whole load of costs that you probably haven't registered yourself, and shows you how to include them in your costs. So profits are probably quite minimal. Tax that you have to pay is probably quite minimal if you do it properly.
One of the things that came up recently in conversation was about core funding for childminders. I want you to explain to the listeners, first off, what core funding is, and then I'll start asking questions on that.
Okay, well, core funding is, at the moment, the department are calling it a pilot for childminders at the moment, so it's not guaranteed that it will be going on ad infinitum, but it is currently ongoing, and it's to compensate childminders for the running costs, basically, of providing the service. Now, what they're saying is that the people who have been awarded core funding will be able to continue to receive it into the future. So that's as much as we know. However, people who are newly registering with TUSA are not eligible to receive it. So presumably there's going to be an alternative provided for them, but we have no information on that at the moment. And just to go backwards a little bit, also to say that the core funding depends on the level of academic qualification within early years. So if you have a degree or a master's or a PhD, you get additional funding on top. So it's really valuable and really made a big difference to childminders who are receiving it. It's really been hugely positive. But
maybe also an encouragement to go on to study further, to develop as well, which I think is a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
On core funding, isn't it true that when the pilot was launched, that the caveat that was attached to it was that childminders didn't increase their fees?
Yes, that's across the board within centre-based core funding and within childminders. And I think it was even more than that. It was the fees that you were charging. I think was it 2021. I think it was. That was the level that you had to agree to stay at, because it's an attempt by the department to not increase fees, because if they're offering NCS and parents are paying, getting subsidies towards the fees, if the fees go up, it sort of negates the benefit of the NCS.
But this was all at a time when the war in Ukraine was happening, the cost of home heating oil was going up, the cost of, if you were collecting children from schools, that your car costs, running a car was going up, etc.
Well, it's been great, but we just don't know quite what's going to replace it.
And isn't it true that, I suppose on the far end of that, when you've got to account for everything, that some accountants aren't qualified to do the maths for you, that you have to have a certain style or a certain quality of accountant to be able to put those figures across for you at the far end?
Yeah, I don't know that it's quality. I think, again, it comes down to qualification.
Sorry, qualification,
Yes. They want people who are qualified accountants rather than somebody who is a bookkeeper.
So you're on the executive for an organisation called Childminding Ireland. What is Childminding Ireland?
Well, Childminding Ireland was created over 40 years ago, and it was a group of childminders who came together who realised that they needed some sort of advocacy channel, some sort of support organisation and so on. So all these years later, that's what we do. We advocate on behalf of childminding, and we offer support and information. And we've gone from the original small group of people now to, I think we have over 10,000 childminding contacts.
Wow, that's sizable.
Yeah, and that includes parents who are using childminding services as well. So we've got the two branches, if you like. We have members as well, and we have childminders who are in contact with us but are not yet members. So it's a very mixed group, and we try and meet their needs. And we would say, you don't obviously have to become a member, but we would really, really love it, because when you're lobbying, it's really important that the bigger the group you represent, you can have a mandate from, the more powerful your lobbying can be.
And from a point of view of governance then, is it the job of Childminding Ireland to regulate childminders, or is that still TUSLA, or where do they fit in that?
That's very much the role of TUSLA. But we work very well with TUSLA. Actually, we have a good relationship with TUSLA, and we have a board which is made up primarily of childminders. We have former childminders on the staff, and I think we're the only organisation in the country to be solely focused on childminding. So we've got a huge wealth of experience and institutional knowledge and contacts, to be frank, so we can do surveys that are much wider reaching than any other organisation when it comes to childminding. And I suppose the other thing I would like to say is that through all this time, we're now talking about regulation and new regulations for childminding, but throughout the 40 years of Childminding Ireland, it's had a membership criteria, and that has evolved over time. And so many childminders have chosen to become members of Childminding Ireland when there's absolutely no requirement on them at all. And the membership criteria includes Garda vetting, first aid, paediatric first aid training, child safeguarding. They sign up to a code of ethics. They have insurance for their business. And that was, in a time when they were choosing to self-regulate. There was absolutely no requirement for them. And I really think that, if you have a childminder who's a member of Childminding Ireland, it is associated with quality. I think that's absolutely without doubt.
You just mentioned something there that, again, it's a bugbear with everybody in business and anybody who even who isn't in business. Another dirty word, insurance. And I know from, the only insurance that I have public liability for my work, and I've got the car insurance. What sort of insurance does a childminder need?
Business insurance for their service. They also need to notify their home insurer, the insurer of their home, because it's a material fact that they're running a business from their home. So that's really important that people remember to notify their home insurer. And if you are transporting the children in your own car as well, again, you would need to make sure they were aware that you were doing that, to make sure that you're fully insured.
And I suppose in that space, are there many insurance providers, or is it, monopolised as a lot of insurance can be?
Yes, no, it is. It's a big problem in the country at large, really. Yes, there's one provider of insurance at the moment, and we work very hard with our broker to get the best deal we can. And it's pretty reasonable, really, for businesses that are minding children. You're minding them on your own. It's €240 a year. It's not excessive, really, when you think of the peace of mind it gives you.
Absolutely, I think that's quite reasonable.
Yeah, very reasonable, really. We hope it doesn't go up, but we think that's fair. We think, and one of the reasons we were talking to the broker about it, and we were told that one of the reasons why it is such a fair rate is that there have been so few claims against childminders in the last 5 years. I think there was only one, and that was settled for quite a low amount. So in terms of risk for the insurers, childminding is
a way forward.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good bet, we would say. But obviously, as more people come in to the childminding space, which, that's obviously going to change. Risks may change, you don't know. But it's interesting. You'd think it would be a higher risk because people are working alone and so on, but it's absolutely not.
And I suppose, again, looking from an insurance point of view, is there anything stopping me from looking for insurance abroad, or would I have to go for an insurance company within the state?
I don't think I'm qualified to comment on that, to be honest with you, Neil. I really don't know. I mean, I did try when we were very concerned about the fact there was only one provider in the country. I did look at colleagues in Northern Ireland, England, Wales and Scotland, and tried to sort of see if there was any way that we could diversify. But they wouldn't enter the Irish market. They were very loath to do that. Even the Northern Irish ones were insuring childminders in Northern Ireland. It wasn't an attractive market for them at that point. But that may have changed because we know that there's an Alliance for Insurance Reform, of which we're a member, that have managed to get a lot of the personal injury claims not involving childminding, but just supporting that reduction in the pressure on the insurance companies. So,
I want to talk briefly about the pros and cons. And I know a lot of people usually end with the cons. I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to have a look at those first. What's problematic to a childminder, or what's problematic in becoming a childminder?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I think, if I'm being really straightforward with you, one of the biggest challenges for childminders are the parents. I think the children are, the thing they really enjoy, or the people they really enjoy, and really wouldn't do it, I think, unless you love children. It's very vocational. Parents and payment on time, things like that, those sort of things can be very tricky because you've developed such relationships with people. So, but we always advise childminders to have a contract with parents so that you go through it in advance and they know what's expected of them and you know what's expected of you. It really does take some of that sort of potential difficulty away. It can be very early starts in the morning if somebody's working irregular hours and needs somebody to take the child very early, and another parent could be working late, so it can be a very long day. It is in your home, so you do need the goodwill of the rest of the family or the other people living in the home, towards the business as well. It really won't work if they're pulling against you. It can be a bit isolating as well. You like anybody at home with children, you can miss adult company. So I would say that would be another advantage of joining Childminding Ireland, which is that we have a community of practice, really. We have a private members forum on Facebook where people can talk to other childminders and, ask that question that they're embarrassed to ask anyone else, or that they just can't find anyone else with the answer to it. So, and you are with other childminders. When you phone up, you're speaking to someone who is a childminder, and you can get huge encouragement and support and information from them.
And with 10,000 childminders in Ireland, there's a lot of support there.
Yeah, well, no, the whole 10,000 wouldn't all be childminders. Remember, some of them are parents who are using childminding facilities, and we're there for the parents as well. But yeah, there's thousands of childminders that are in contact with us, so you wouldn't be alone, that's for sure.
And then that brings me to the benefits. Of course, there's going to be benefits of being a childminder. Can you give us just a few benefits of being a childminder as opposed to a childcare provider, and benefits to the child? Because at the end of the day, it's child-centred as opposed to centre-based.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it, really. I think and maybe take the benefits to the child first. I think it's about being an individual. I think that's really important. You can be an individual because it's a very small group, and the childminder can follow individual children's interests and use those to develop learning and creativity and so on. I think as well that the small group, it's nice to have other children that you're with on an ongoing basis, so they do become like cousins or extended families, so that's lovely for children. I think the spontaneity is a huge thing for me looking at childminding, and it can even just depend on the weather. You know, if you have good weather, you can go and do something. If you had bad weather, plan B. You know, there's no routine as well. Maybe that's the wrong way of putting it. There's no agenda that you have to follow every day, and the time has to be done at this time. And I think another thing that people underestimate is the community aspect of it, that, you know, all the normal things like going to the post office and putting a letter in the post box and going to the grocers or whatever. It's really lovely, and we do have parents say that to us, that that's how they got to know a lot of people in the area they live in, because the children know them from going out and about with the childminder. And, you know, we also know that the childminder's family plays a big part in it, that, you know, maybe older relatives pop in during the day and everybody calls them, you know, Granny Eve or whoever it is. You know, it's really nice. So we just think it's fantastic, really, for children.
Really, it sounds like it's normalising preschool education. It's bringing it into that community space,
yeah,
as opposed to, it's like a Nina or a creche or something that is very structured.
Yes, and it's all the life learning things. You know, we say that the learning you do, just like being at home, you know, you could be helping the childminder matching socks, you know, and matching colours and pegging things out on the line and counting. You know, it's much more natural way of learning. I think sometimes you just hear parents talking to their children, or you're in situations where everything has to be a learning opportunity, and it's absolutely exhausting to listen to as an adult, never mind to have to, you know, if you're a poor preschool child, you know, you just want to play with a box or something. You know, it doesn't have to be that complicated, and they can learn so much if they're following their own interest. So
and at the end of the day, the child is still problem solving through
absolutely,
play.
absolutely. You know? Oh, hugely. I think the play is much more free and spontaneous and individual in a childcare setting, because it's not structured by an adult deciding what we're going to play today. You know, it's very much child-led. So I think it's just wonderful.
Wasn't that Maria Montessori, though, as well, that she had said something about allowing the child to, not to dictate, but allowing the child to lead in what they were going to do?
Yeah.
You know, so in the middle of a session, we'll call it, of learning, you know, colours or numbers, that if the child wanted to go off and play with a doll or something, then it was free to do so.
Yeah, because, you know, children have different attention spans and different abilities to focus, and, you know, you have to do it at their individual pace and their individual style, and the last thing you want to do is frustrate a child by making them do something they're just not at that point ready or able or willing to do.
And that brings me on to, I suppose, the future of the industry of childminding. What does that look like? Or at the moment, I'd say, because
Yeah.
you know, we're pre-election season. So what does the future of childminding in Ireland look like?
Well, as you mentioned, the election, I suppose it depends who wins to some extent. I know that some are very keen on a publicly owned early years sector, and others aren't. So to some extent, that's up in the air. So from a childminding perspective, I suppose it just comes down to how successful these new regulations are going to prove, who we can recruit, who we can retain, and what changes do we need to make for the future. I mean, we're trying to keep it simple in Childminding Ireland, that we just make sure that we focus on childminding and keep our eyes open for any problems that are arising, and make sure that we lobby hard on those before anything becomes mandatory.
Again, looking at the future, and I don't know if this is the same for childcare provision, but the industry always seems to be looking at ways of identifying what parts of education work and how to tweak it and make it better. And we often hear these KPIs and so on, these learning outcomes. Has anybody ever done a survey or to say, do you know what, kids that go through a childminder as opposed to centre-based seem to be, better in social structures or are better gifted at certain things?
There's lots of research that's been done. I don't have any at the top of my head to be able to tell you the name of the articles, but I can get that for you. But certainly children who start school that have been through a childminder, often their vocabulary will be, their language will be more developed, their social skills will be more developed, their ability to play and share and interact with other children is often well developed. I haven't seen anything that has suggested that children working with childminders are in any way disadvantaged whatsoever. In fact, quite the opposite. So I think it's a win-win.
I think in my mind as well, childminders seem to be, by the very nature, more flexible in the service that they can provide. So as you mentioned earlier, somebody has to be in work early or is going to be delayed or whatever. That normally childminders go, look, that's okay, we can cover this, or we've got you. You know, where if it's centre based, they have a tendency to go, well, I've got staff and they have to be out of here at a certain time, and oh my God,
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure it is a pressure on creches because I know sometimes they introduce fines if people are late to collect. Well, not fines as such, but they need to pay a little bit more. It is definitely, they're much more flexible. And I think, that's so important for people who are working irregular hours, or typically women are at home with children. If they're going back into the workplace, they might be going back part-time. Trying to get a part-time place for childcare is very difficult at the moment. All our public servants really, like the guards and nurses and fire, shift workers, and also retail and people working other types of shifts, they can be fairly low paid workers, and so many people rely on childminding. I think 65,000 children in the last census were being minded by childminders. I mean, that's a huge number of childcare places.
Huge.
Yeah.
Like I had mentioned at the start of the interview that like 77,000 children roughly every year are born.
Yeah.
If 65,000 of those are going into childminding places, that's incredible.
Yeah. So, that was countrywide, but that wasn't per year. That would be all the the children that were currently in childminding places. If you know what I mean? Yeah.
Which is incredible. And also you'd mentioned the guards and the nurses and so on. For frontline responders, I call them, from COVID. And I think when COVID came and childminders were asked if they had frontline responders to keep their creches open, keep their facility open, I think it showed the benefit of childminders, of what they could do and what they were willing to do. Because it's not just keeping a facility open, it's keeping your house open to the possibility of infection as well.
Yes, absolutely. And especially because frontline workers were probably at more risk as members of society, to be minding their children specifically as well. The risk was higher than if it was somebody who was going into an office or something, So, they did a fantastic job, and I really think they were underappreciated for it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, Bernadette, I'm going to bring in Sylvia now, who is a childminder working from home. I believe that's your preferred designation.
Yeah. Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm quite good, Sylvia. Thank you so much for coming on to the programme. Sylvia,
thank you for having me on your programme.
Sylvia, so you're a childminder. You work from home.
Yeah.
So it's not like a prefab or a ready-made building.
No, it's a nice home from home environment for the small group of children and parents that I work with. Makes it very special, and I would say, especially for the young children, very easy transition to come from their home to my home and to my family.
Okay, so you're working from home, right? Obviously, because it's a facility, there's certain things you've got to do to make it up to a standard. What's involved?
I am TUSLA registered childminder since 2011, and I had to follow the TUSLA regulations, and HEC regulations and TUSLA regulations up to now, because at the moment we have our new regulations specifically designed for childminders. Until now, following the previous regulations, pretty much I had to adhere to everything that the big creches would adhere to. There were loads of changes that I had to do in my own home to adopt and to adjust to be able to provide and to carry on my business.
So give me an example of some of the stuff that you've had to change.
This is thing, the fireplace. The fireplace, you have to find the way, the fireplace to be safe for the children. Would that be a fire guard or will be different way to block the fireplace and to be safe for the children? There are loads of small details that we had to change in the house. The smoke alarm, the doors, the gates on the stairs.
Now, when you say gates on the stairs, there's a designated or a proper official lock gate at the bottom of the stairs and at the
Yes,
top of the stairs.
yes. When you have and when you work with small children and when you use if you are providing your service from a house like ours, I use one of the bedrooms upstairs as a sleep room for the little ones, and the children have an access to the second floor of my house, or if they need to go to the toilet, our toilet is upstairs, then you need to provide one stairs on the top of the floor, on the top stairs and the bottom of the stairs. Then we had to adjust some stuff in the bathroom. You have to have a designated potty area for the little ones when the little children go through potty training. Your garden needs to be adjusted, it needs to be changed, locks on the doors, fire exits.
Okay, so let me go through a list here, just see if I'm missing anything. I'm going to start. Let's say it's a three-bedroom, semi-standard
Yeah,
house, right?
yeah,
So your driveway at the front has to be
clear.
clear. Your front door has to have certain locks on it.
Yes, and the door
And
needs to be locked all of the time, and the key needs to be close to the door, and the children won't be allowed
so
to
the
open the
keys have
door.
to be out of reach of children.
Yeah,
Okay. Your radiators all have to be covered.
covered, of course.
Your presses and your drawers in the kitchen all have to have locks.
Yeah,
Your electrical goods, toasters, hob, kettle, all have to be out of reach.
not out of reach. They have to be safe, and there is a risk assessment that I have to carry on every Monday, and all of those risk assessments are signed every month.
All your sockets have to have covers on them.
Yes, of course.
All your extension cables have to be hidden
Covered.
away,
Yes,
not have no access to them.
yes. Not exposed.
You have to have a smoke alarm in every room
Yeah, where children are using.
and
And
every room
generally,
above where the children are using as
yes,
well. Isn't that
yes,
correct? Okay, so that means you have to dig out channels and walls to run cables. Essentially.
essentially.
Okay, and then you said your back garden has to be fit for purposes as well. So that includes, I suppose, within risk assessment capabilities, levels, layers, sharp corners,
Of course.
barbecues out of the way.
Absolutely. The plants that you have to have in the garden needs to be, of
Non-poisonous.
course.
Yeah. So, okay, so you've got all the back gates or access to the back
Back
has to
gates
be
closed.
locked,
If you have sheds, the
sheds
sheds needs
locked.
to be locked. If you have area with stones, the stones needs to be maintained, or you just have to adjust loads of stuff to the age group of the children that you are working with.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop and sweat now because that sounds like, oh my God, that's going to A, take a lot of time, B, take a lot of money
Yeah,
just to be a childminder,
yeah.
to have maximum five children. So how do you make money? That seems like an awful lot of regulation for five kids. You're not like a you're not like a big creche or a series of creches. You're one person, five kids.
Yes, it is. And for a long time, it was for the small group of TUSLA registered childminders. Now, regulations are changed and they're more appropriate for the home environment and for the children that the age group and the children that we are working with.
So tell me the difference now, as the regulations stand at the moment, between registered and non-registered childminders.
Registered childminders have to follow the regulations. If you're not registered childminder, according to the new regulations, there is a certain period of time until 2027 that if you wish to take care after at least one child, you must be. It's recommendable that you have to be registered, TUSLA registered.
But that could change with the next government. I mean, that's the fear that we live with. That my God, we jump through the hoops to get to where we are, being the good little citizens, and suddenly it's all changed tomorrow.
Yeah, actually, I hope that the new government will follow the good work that was put in place because we went through loads of loads of meetings and consultations in regards to the new regulations. And to be honest, I'm absolutely happy with the new regulations that we have. There is a room to improve, there is a room to be changed. Of course, it is a living document. This document needs to be, I would say, let's say in 18 months, need to be readdressed. The regulations needs to be addressed again and to see what is appropriate and applicable to the reality.
So here we are, January 2025. We're just after coming through an election. And there's been a lot of belly bluster and talk from the government about trying to keep the cost of childminding down to €200 a month.
Childcare.
Sorry, childcare
Yeah.
down to €200 a month. How much of that is nonsense?
Looks like the politicians just scrapped everything that they've been told by the childcare providers because before the elections they were visiting, they were coming at the doors and promising miracles. But reality is very different than what the politicians are saying. And if they were listening, the people on the ground, all of us that are working very hard, and we experience our up and downs and facing problems with parents and with children and trying to sustain our small businesses because they are small businesses and our families suffer as a result of those businesses. We welcome people that never met in our lives.
You've been working in this sector in childcare provision all your life.
Yeah.
right? So you're in your mid 50s now. You've been working in this sector since you're in your late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
You've worked in under three different regimes.
Yes, I did.
You worked in your home country,
Yeah.
in a state-run creche.
Yeah.
So you've got some knowledge about what a state-run creche is.
Absolutely big difference. Our creches, our kindergartens, they were purposely built buildings.
Now,
Every little group would, let's say a group of 20 children to 25, they would have their own sleep area, their own play area, outdoor area. Children will have an afternoon nap, all of the children. The place would be open from 7:30 until in the morning until 7:30 in the evening.
12 hours.
Yes.
Okay, so how much is that going to cost you? You need twice the staff. You can't hold on to anybody. It's state-run, purpose-built building. Our government can't even build secondary schools.
State run, and let's say roughly it's around, it depends on the parent's income, but let's say roughly between 20 to 50 euro a month.
Now, that's how many years ago and in what country?
That's many years ago in Bulgaria.
Okay, so the average income was relative to what the cost was.
Yes, have changed.
Okay, so the average cost of living today, forget about childcare, is huge. Okay, and they're going to try and bring this down to 50 euros a week effectively.
Yeah.
And yet they're going to overregulate it, so the cost to the childcare provider is going to go through the roof. Because when you had mentioned about, for example, fire alarms, it doesn't just stop there. You have to get somebody in to maintain them. You have to have them tested on a regular basis. There's a cost to that.
Actually, the regulations at the moment for childminders are not the same as they used to be. They're more childminders friendly regulations.
So a little bit more lenient.
Yes.
You've been most of your life in childcare.
Yeah.
It's right, working in childcare. You're in your mid 50s now. You've got, let's say, another 10, 12 years before retirement. Do you see many younger women coming into childcare or childminding? Or is it just the big creches now seem to swallow them up and spit them out?
I really hope childminding will get a fresh, enthusiastic women. And when, of course,
To your mind, what does the future look like for childminders in Ireland?
I would say the next few years will be very interesting and challenging until the new regulations are properly in place. And to be honest, I really hope people that love what they do, because I love what I do, I hope that those that are in the childminding sector will be happy and satisfied, and the future will be bright.
One last question then, while we're looking at the future. What's the future for Childminding Ireland? Where do you guys go from here?
Yes, yeah, well, at the moment we're campaigning really heavily with the department to look for additional funding. We've had the same funding, probably I think about 20 years, the same funding, not 1 cent extra. And obviously the costs of living have gone up hugely during that period. We've got 5 part-time members of staff. We've a huge workload, especially with this the new regulations coming in, and I think we've been enormously active in that, and we want to support childminders even more.
So if there was one thing that on a wish list of maybe 100 things, obviously, that you can ask the department for,
Yeah.
what would be top of the list?
Well, additional funding so that we could recruit some additional staff and we could really do some of the work that we would love to do. We'd love to be able to afford to go out around the country holding in-person meetings. We're going to do monthly online meetings starting next Tuesday, the 4th of November. There comes a point when, however willing we are, there's a limit to what we can do with the resources we have, and that's a shame.
So, more resources, please,
yes.
Minister.
Yes, absolutely.
Whoever the new minister may be by the time that this is broadcast.
Who knows, yeah.
I'd like to thank both Bernadette from Childminding Ireland and Sylvia Avramova for their input in today's programme, because it leads on to how we go on forward into primary and secondary education. For the way the world is going now, and Liffey Sound FM, I'm your host, Neil Elworthy. Until next time, stay tuned, stay safe.